Now, despite the fact that American officials have come out in support of how the Israeli army behaved in dealing with those Gaza protests, there has been unprecedented criticism in the international community, particularly by human rights groups. You have, for example, Human Rights Watch saying that the IDF's behavior was a bloodbath. You have the United Nations saying that it was outrageous. You have Amnesty International saying, to quote, that there was a horrifying use of live ammunition against unarmed protesters. Now, the latest figures we have from the Gaza Health Ministry are that 119 people were killed in 9 weeks of violence. The situation on the ground is still tense, and unfortunately, we're bracing ourselves for those figures to climb.
Middle East correspondent there, also in Tel Aviv, waiting to talk to us, journalist and filmmaker David Sheen. David, welcome to the programme. I've just been reading up about you. I know that you've been professionally immersed in what's going on there for years now, from human rights through to the religious underlying causes of this. You know how complex it is in Gaza right now. So what do you make of the US ambassador's comments? Have a lot of journalists shown a lack of willingness to understand those complexities?
Well, his actual quote was, "Keep your mouth shut until you figure it out." So essentially, he's saying you can't report on any massacre. It doesn't matter if the death toll goes up into triple digits or if there's medics or whatever, journalists being shot. You can't report on any massacre unless you first frame it within a narrative that justifies it. You know, this is ridiculous. This whole Trumpian attack, everything is fake news unless you declare the narrative as we see it. The thing is, this is sadly not anything new, just as, you know, this has been the case in the US for some time, but in Israel it's been this way for a decade under Netanyahu, constantly attacking the media. He's got most of it in his back pocket in the sense that the largest newspaper in the country is owned by his political patron, Sheldon Adelson. The largest selling newspaper in the country, Yediot Achronot, right now, Netanyahu is under investigation, criminal charges for engaging in backroom deals where he was promised by the publisher of this newspaper positive coverage. So this attempt to control the media spin, in any case, even when your own eyes tell you this is an outrageous massacre, sadly it's nothing new in Israel, but you know, this is creeping all the more into trying to dominate the news narrative outside when these images get out, try to shut it down. And essentially it's gaslighting, trying to bully the media into stopping all reporting of it. But it's really Friedman himself that we should have a look at, and his views. It's not only about the media, it's about his own advocacy. So, you know, in the past we've had different ambassadors to Israel who, you know, could be accused of bias, but Friedman, he isn't just supporting the Israeli government. His political positions actually eclipse them on the right. He's in support of the farthest, most far-right factions of the Israeli government and beyond it. He's actually coming in support of Kahanist groups, groups that are openly advocating for expanding Israel's borders, for ethnically cleansing the non-Jews living in the country, and in turning the country of Israel from an ethnocracy that privileges Jews on the basis of their ethnicity, turning that country into a theocracy where it will be fully governed by Jewish religious law. These are the types of groups that Friedman is supporting, is signaling his support for, and that is very scary. He's actually further right than the current Israeli government, if you can imagine that.
And what about maybe giving the benefit of the doubt to other journalists outside of where you are in their coverage of the Great March of Return and the protests that we've seen over the past 9 weeks or so, because it is a deeply emotive issue that's been running for decades, if not longer. It's not something that could be summed up in an article, in a short TV piece, or in a tweet. But would they be accused, do you think, or some have been accused, of being too uncritical of Israel, being a little soft on Israel?
Unfortunately, we're living in an era when it's almost impossible for anyone to criticize the Israeli government's actions, no matter how deplorable they may be, because they will be instantly be accused of racism. Instead of examining, you know, are the actions of the government based on racism, we're looking at any critic of those racist actions being accused themselves of racism. And sadly, it doesn't even matter if you yourself are Jewish, or even if you are yourself Israeli. Even Jewish Israeli journalists like myself will get accused of the same thing. Of course there's real anti-Semitism in the world, but it's frankly horrific that this claim is being used to shut down the conversation. There's an overwhelming amount of coverage of what's happening. People just have to see what's happening. Now, of course, there's context. Of course, it's important to know the history. But there's a lot of history that's not being reported also. There's no way to confine it into just a few minutes. If we look at the facts, I think it's pretty clear that they're overwhelmingly demonstrating that the Israeli government isn't just trying to defend itself, but is actually trying to destroy any idea of Palestinian nationalism, any idea of the chance that there could be some level, some measure of equality on the ground. In the last decade, under Netanyahu and previous governments, we've seen the settlements expand and expand and expand. Gaza under siege. What opportunity do people have? They realize there's no more two-state solution, and in fact, Friedman and the Trump government are supporting the apartheid solution, the one-state solution in which Israel controls all the land from the river to the sea, and in that territory, in which Jews are only 49% of the territory, for there to be Jewish rule, for Jews to have more rights than non-Jews.